Hey everybody, what's going on? Welcome back into the Frogs Up TCU Sports Podcast. I am Russ Hodges. That is Anthony North. We appreciate y'all joining us. We are back recording at our regularly scheduled Sunday evening time, post sinus infection, post bachelor weekend shenanigans for me. Feeling back to 100%. Had a really nice weekend. Did some holiday celebrating yesterday. Getting into the Christmas spirit. Had a white elephant party with some friends and family. Had our ugly Christmas sweaters on. Got some fun gifts to go around. May or may not have gotten iced as a part of the festivities yesterday, but all in all, had a really exciting weekend and going to have some more family Christmas parties coming up over the next couple of weeks. So really excited for that. But we have a big slate of content for y'all this evening and excited to get into everything. And we have some breaking news to discuss as well concerning our TCU Horned Frog football program. So very excited to get into that tonight.
Yeah, man, this is going to be a big show. I think this is one that a lot of TCU fans have been focused on and kind of calling for maybe for like 2 seasons. So I think we'll have a lot to say about it. Yeah, I'm glad you got into some holiday spirit here. I got some of that as well. We had our neighborhood Christmas event, the Santa and all the. It's hard here so far to get into the Christmas spirit because it was like 80 degrees through the last couple weeks and like into the weekend. It's been super hot, but it's been drove around the neighborhood and looked at Christmas lights tonight as well and getting ready for some holiday travels coming up. So yeah, leading into this holiday time, it's a busy season. We've got our transfer portal popping. We've got recruiting early signing day coming, and yeah, this breaking news. Let's jump into it.
Absolutely. We'll waste no more time and go ahead and get this episode started. This episode, of course, is brought to you all by our friends at Charlie Hustle Clothing Company. Charlie Hustle, vintage made fresh. Go to charliehustle.com. Get your TCU Horned Frog swag right now. T-shirts, hoodies, and more. Use that promo code FROGSOWAR. Get 15% off all TCU items. We also offer our exclusive promo code through a partnership with the 1012 Network. That gets you 15% off any item at charliehustle.com. That is the promo code 101215 TEN 1215 charliehustle.com. The On It Athlete TCU Horned Frog football trading cards are live. We have affiliate links posted to our Facebook and Twitter pages at Frogs of War, also at our website at frogsofwar.com. Check that out. Anthony, I know you got a pack, and we talked about that last week. You got a chance to show those off. 33% of all revenue from the pack sales go to NIL. So support the TCU football program, support the student athletes. Holiday season's right around the corner. Get yourselves some On It Athlete TCU Horned Frog football trading cards. Great stocking stuffers for the holiday coming up. Also, we have our partnership with Prize Picks. If you are interested in playing daily fantasy sports, use the promo code FROGS12, FROGS12. That gets you a 100% deposit match up to $100 on daily fantasy sports. All right, breaking news. Dun-dun-dun, dun-dun-dun. Jeremy Clark of Horned Frog Blitz reporting earlier today that TCU football is parting ways with defensive coordinator Joe Gillespie. Gillespie was hired back in 2022 from Tulsa to come in and run the 3-3-5 under head coach Sonny Dykes. This defense showed flashes last season. Of course, tremendous effort against Texas in that win. Some great individual performances from guys like Dylan Horton and D. Winters and Trey Tomlinson, the Jim Thorpe Award winner. However, the defense collectively took a significant step in the wrong direction this year, and the season culminated with a abysmal defensive performance against Oklahoma, where TCU gave up 62 offensive points as well as over 600 total yards. And I know, Anthony, on the podcast, I mentioned that there was no scenario where I thought Joe Gillespie would be back on the TCU coaching staff next year. I just felt like there was too much regression all around on this defense. And when you look at some of the players who are going to be leaving for the NFL or guys who have left to the transfer portal, a change needed to be made. And ultimately, I'll keep my reaction to this very simple and straightforward. I think it's a tough decision, but I think it's the right decision for TCU right now. And it was a decision that needed to be made. Sonny Dykes has talked a big game about TCU needing to carry itself like it's a big boy program. And when big boy programs have these kinds of seasons like TCU had in 2023, finishing 5-7 and not making a bowl game after winning 13 games and going to the national championship last year, big changes have to be made. And, people talked about the offense and Kendall Briles needing to go. I think in this situation, it was probably easier for TCU to move on from Gillespie. I think, Anthony, as you've said on the podcast before, Sonny Dykes has kind of hitched his wagon to Kendall Briles as the associate head coach slash quarterbacks coach slash OC for this team. And defensively, there just wasn't enough growth for TCU this year. And some of the young guys that we were really excited about coming in, like Marcus Deal and Avion Carter and Jonathan Bax, who's now in the transfer portal, those guys just didn't really make an impact this year. And we didn't see some of the veteran guys take big enough steps forward to really carry this defense this year. So, all in all, for me, I think, again, it's a tough decision, but as a head coach at this level, when you're getting paid all those dollars, you have to be able to make these kinds of decisions. And I'll leave it with this for me. I think the timing is interesting. The off season has been underway for a few weeks now. Early signing day is in a couple of weeks as well. So TCU hasn't signed any of its 2024 commits yet, but I think Sonny Dykes and TCU wouldn't be making this move right now unless they had a replacement in mind. So I'm going to be paying attention to the news over the next several days because I think we're probably going to find out sooner rather than later who the new TCU defensive coordinator is going to be. And what we'll also be learning is, will TCU stick with the 3-3-5? Is Sonny Dykes still convinced that the 3-3-5 can be effective? Or will he pivot and look to hire somebody that will bring in a different scheme, whether it's a 3-4 or a 4-3 or even a 4-2-5? All of that remains to be seen. I'm sure we will get those answers in the near future, but it's been a kind of a shocking day for TCU fans to have this news come out. It sort of came out of left field. Again, kind of awkward timing, but ultimately I think it was the right decision for TCU to move on from Gillespie. And by all accounts, he seems like a great guy. The players seem to really respect him. I know there were quite a few players that posted to Twitter after this news broke and were a little stunned by it. But at the end of the day, if you want to be a big time program, you have to be able to make corrections for the struggles that you have. And I think this was a move that needed to be made when the season was over. And at the end of the day, I'm happy that TCU is taking a step in that direction to get somebody else in there.
Yeah, I think to your big time program point, I think you'll find out how much it's a big time program move based on who gets brought in as the replacement. It's hard to know whether this is good or bad until you know that, and really until you see results on the field over the next seasons. How much of this, it's hard to say after such a short time period. Part of what makes this such a difficult choice for TCU and for Sonny Dykes is this defense was good enough to play in the national championship last year, to lead this team to all those wins, to a college football playoff semifinal win, scoring 2 defensive touchdowns against the undefeated Big Ten champions in the biggest game of the year. There's those are things that you can't take away from Joe Gillespie or from TCU and TCU fans. So it's hard to come away from that. And even last season, there were times where this defense seemed like it wasn't totally working, but TCU was still winning games. And then this season, the defense really wasn't working, and it really was not winning games. And I think the way this 2023 season started, and then the way that it finished, it's hard. It was hard to see a scenario where this wasn't going to be the way things shook out. I think, like you said, the timing is kind of interesting. It wasn't something that it was like the minute the season ended, we had the announcement and the press conference, and things happened then, and the search party started for some new defensive coordinator at that point. And also, Sonny Dykes did not roll this out longer past early signing day, past the transfer portal closing into the spring, where you can kind of slip things past recruits, slip things past kind of the active college football media space. So I think that is an indication that this was well considered, and that Sonny Dykes has some kind of plan here out of this. I think he very much could have just said, "Look, guys, we were just in the national championship game. I know you're not happy. We're not in a bowl, but it's going to be boom or bust for us. We're working here to win national championships. This season wasn't that. Come and see us next season, and we're going to go do it again." And run the whole game right back with the whole crew. And I think that would have been well within Sonny Dykes' right to do, because he's earned that level of cachet, and fans should just deal with it the same way fans are. You just have to deal with Kendall Briles as your offensive coordinator. Just deal with it. So I think he very much could have done that. So to take this step, and it would have been one of those things if he had let Gillespie linger another season, that it would have been hitching your wagon to it again. But with time, by the time next season rolled around, if TCU was winning games again, it wouldn't have mattered. The TCU fans would have all shut up about it. They would have been in our game threads and tweeting about it. And anytime a play, TCU gave up a touchdown, they'd be saying, fire Joe. But really, it would all be the same kind of yelling into the void. So I think that for him to make this decision, it didn't come lightly. And it has to mean that there are big things coming in the future for him and for this program, because he would not have made this move without having something ready. I think part of Jeremy's reporting was that it will not be an internal hire to take over the defensive coordinator role. So, it's not going to be a promotion from within. Thus far, I haven't seen reporting that any other of the position coaches or anyone else on the staff has been let go. So for now, it's just Coach Gillespie, and a search for a new head of the defense going forward.
Yeah, to that point, it's worth noting that we've had some transfer portal news regarding players, but this is the first news of a TCU coach of any kind leaving the program. So we'll see what happens as this offseason moves forward, as far as whether or not some of these position coaches will be sticking around, whether or not a change at D coordinator will impact some of those assistants on the defensive side of the ball. But for Gillespie, I'm not sure, for TCU recruiting wise, I'm not sure how much Gillespie's departure will impact what TCU currently has. I'm not sure how involved Gillespie was in directly recruiting some of these players, some of these defensive linemen, defensive backs that Jamarcus McFarland and Paul Gonzalez and Carlton Buckles were really going after. I think those are the guys that may have a little bit more weight there, as far as building those relationships with those players. But look into the future as far as potential replacements for Joe Gillespie and some of the names that could be out there, could be of interest to TCU. If Sonny Dykes sticks with the 3-3-5 and still believes in that scheme, Zach Arnett is out there, former Mississippi State head coach who runs a 3-3-5. Danny Gonzalez, who's a former New Mexico head coach and has a lot of experience in that 3-3-5 defense. Those are two names that are definitely qualified to take on that defensive coordinator role with TCU. But should Sonny Dykes decide to pivot from the 3-3-5, then the umbrella will probably get much wider. I think I'd like to believe Sonny Dykes will stick with the 3-3-5. I'm personally still not sold on it, just given what TCU will have coming back from a personnel standpoint. I just don't know if TCU has the horses up front to run this scheme effectively, because you need those three guys up front to be able to hold their own down there and to be able to generate some pressure. And how many times this past season did we see these defensive linemen for TCU just get completely washed off the line of scrimmage, whether it was Kansas State or Oklahoma or even Texas Tech? TCU just struggled to hold its own in the trenches this year. And you could chalk that up to youth. You could chalk that up to guys not taking steps forward. But the fact of the matter was TCU really struggled on the defensive line this year. And I'm just not sure if you can find those guys in the portal. Now, TCU just did get a commitment from a defensive lineman, and we'll get to that here in a few minutes. But I guess my opinion is I think TCU will probably stick with the 3-3-5, but it's going to take me personally a lot of convincing to get my mind changed on it. Anthony, I'm not sure how you feel about the 3-3-5 versus other schemes, but what are your thoughts on where TCU could go with this decision here to get a new D coordinator in here?
Yeah, I think regarding the 3-3-5, I mean, Sonny Dykes had said that part of the reason he wanted to move to that and bring in Gillespie in particular was that was the defense that caused his offenses the most trouble. That it was set up in a way that could specifically stop what Sonny Dykes offenses like to do. So how many of those, though, are left in the Big 12 and on your schedule going forward? I mean, next year TCU is playing teams like Stanford and Utah. Are those really the kind of teams where you want to go out there with that kind of defensive plan? I don't know. I think that's something that they'll have to review and analyze of whether it's the right thing for what TCU will need to do. I mean, is that the kind of defense that can stop what Kansas State does? Can it stop what Kansas does? I don't know. Right now, I mean, those are offenses that have done well against this TCU defense. Even Oklahoma State from 2 seasons ago, I think even like UCF, really you're going to start looking across the board, and the running games in this conference are really, really good. It is not the old Big 12 of like 6 years ago when everyone's throwing it around the yard constantly, and it's this just, everybody's putting up 70 points per game. There are some of the best running backs in the country. Now 2 years in a row, the Doak Walker Award for top running back has been given to a Big 12 runner. So, and a lot of these guys are coming back. So you're going to have to be able to, in the trenches, grind out in these run games against some of these hard-nosed teams. And it's just really tough to do that with the defensive front that TCU has played the last 2 seasons. So that would be the thing that concerns me. And, maybe you talked about the lack of growth from some of those guys. I think that's what maybe is the nail in the coffin here for Gillespie is
Mm-hmm.
it felt like nobody was getting better,
Yeah.
particularly up front. I mean, Timon Mitchell didn't take a step. Caleb Fox didn't take a step. Sony Misi didn't take a step. Guys who they were counting on to. Paul Oyewale contributed and had a pretty okay season, but I don't think he took that leap that you really needed for that defense to be successful this season. So, some of those guys will be back and will have opportunity to take that step under a new coaching staff and maybe a new scheme. But I think that's the piece of, scheme aside and, whatever play calling aside, the guys just it didn't feel like people were getting better. I think Josh Newton had a really good season. Dominic Williams had a really good season. But I don't know that they got coached up and now they're a lot better for this scheme. That level of improvement that you hope to get from your coach, I don't think that was there either. So, you want to bring in somebody, if it is going to be the 3-3-5, where the same way like Gary Patterson used to do, and I don't know if we're going to talk about him as a potential replacement. We can. That's not a realistic thing, but we can have that fiction game. But, the way that staff in the old days would bring in these guys and turn them into stars and turn them, turn your 2 and 3 stars into conference champions. And that was just not really happening. Where those guys just weren't getting better. So I think that's whoever it is needs to be kind of that teacher, that grower of talent to take, because as good as TCU may still be in the top 2 or 3 every single season in the Big 12 in recruiting, but if your goal is to compete at a playoff level, you're going to have to take those guys and bump it up a notch to be able to compete with those teams from the SEC and the Big Ten who are starting off on third base from a talent standpoint.
And one thing that stood out to me, and we talked about this so many times this season about this defense, was the inability to get pressure on the quarterback. And there are a lot of good quarterbacks in the Big 12, and many of them will be coming back next year. You have to be able to get pressure on these guys. And there were so many games this season where TCU just could not generate any pressure up front without having multiple guys come on delayed blitzes where you're putting your secondary sort of on an island. And for what it's worth, I think over the first half of the season, that was really a strength of this defense, was how well the secondary competed against some of these lesser teams where quarterbacks were struggling to complete 50% of their passes, despite the fact that they were having 4, 5, 6 seconds to throw the ball. They would often have to just throw it away, or they would get flushed out of the pocket after, sitting back, reading a book, getting all their taxes done and what else. But as TCU got into the second half of the season and started facing some offenses with more firepower, stronger offensive lines, they just could not compete. And so I think you have to have a defense that's able to go out there and consistently pressure the quarterback with the guys who are up front. So I mean, I don't know if TCU will do this next year. Like I said, I think Sonny Dykes, knowing him, will probably stick with the 3-3-5, but a 3-4 defense would really intrigue me, because when you have that edge rusher who's a pass rush specialist, first of all, that position, of course, has become a premium position in today's game, especially at the NFL level. I think if you can implement a defense that features that position, you give yourself an opportunity to maybe sell recruits to come to TCU and be a big time pass rusher. And I think you can really still play with four guys up front. I mean, there was a brief moment uh, during the season. I think it was during the Texas Tech game where Jamoy Hodge actually came down from his linebacker position and was lining up as almost like an edge rusher off the line of scrimmage. And I think that's actually a role where Jamoy Hodge could be successful. He's had, I think, 9.5 sacks over the last 2 seasons combined. So that's just something that I would like to see TCU consider is if you want to keep three down linemen, okay, but why not feature an edge rusher as opposed to just three linebackers in the middle of the defense? Um, have a guy who is a pass rush specialist who can just rush the passer, and you're not having to rely so much on delayed blitzes or cornerback blitzes or what else to get pressure on the quarterback. I don't know. I'm just kind of spitballing there. Um, Anthony, would you like to see TCU stick with the 3-3-5, or would you like to see TCU consider something else?
I think it's about getting the dudes. I mean,
Mm,
it's it's not the X's and O's, it's the Jims and Joes. And that's, I mean, college football is about uh, it's about a lot of things, but having better talent than your opponent uh is something you can do in college football. And yeah, it works when TCU is going up against BYU and even SMU and Houston um, this past season, but it's not going to work like that if TCU doesn't have the right guys in there. So I think the 3-3-5 is can work and can work just fine. But like we've said a bunch of times, you just have to have the dudes up front or coming off the edge. And it is kind of disappointing because I think projecting forward, we thought Jonathan Bax was going to be that guy in the future for TCU. That is, he came in as kind of an undersized edge where he could have been one of those types of, you know, maybe he's a linebacker, maybe he's a down lineman, but in any case, he's a guy that can get after the quarterback.
mhm,
And now he's in the transfer portal, and now maybe the scheme is changing. But that's the kind of thing that TCU needs somebody who has the motor and the skills and the power. And those guys are very, very difficult to come by, especially when you're going to be competing both in the recruiting and transfer market. And, everyone in the country needs those guys.
mhm,
And so Joe Gillespie was not given the time to develop his guys to become that. And nobody became that this season with the departure of Dylan Horton. It was left as an empty hole there. So whoever it is, if it's going to be a 3-3-5, we have to see someone develop or bring that guy in, and maybe this our Fort Worth guy from Notre Dame coming in, maybe he's that kind of guy. We'll see, but somebody who can get some push, get some pressure, and make things a little easier on those defensive backs because they end up getting put into bad positions where they look silly out there, but it's kind of just it's the position they've been placed in. So
mhm,
I think it relies more on having dudes that can execute at a high level. I think Gary Patterson's 4-2-5 relied a lot on outsmarting and out scheming, and it still relied on dudes. Obviously, you needed guys to go make plays, but I think there was a lot more maybe cerebral to it, where this is more have the best player and go win the rep every time.
mhm. And ultimately, we will see what TCU decides to do here in the near future. And like I said, I think this is a decision that will be made here pretty soon as far as who is going to be the replacement. And speaking of those Jims and Joes, I think that will segue nicely into our next TCU football item here, which is our most recent transfer portal update. We have more departures from the program, but we also have two new arrivals to talk about this evening. The first being offensive lineman Carson Bruno from Louisiana Tech, and the second one being Nana Osafo-Mensah, defensive lineman from Notre Dame and also a Fort Worth, Texas native. Former four-star recruit, I believe, as a high school player. He's a veteran guy. Had 3 sacks this season for Notre Dame. I think 6'2", 6'3", 260 pounds, I believe. A guy who will no doubt come in and compete for a chance to start right away. And then Carson Bruno, a 2-time Conference USA honorable mention on the offensive line for Louisiana Tech. 6'4", 315 pounds roughly. I haven't watched much film on either of these guys yet. Carson Bruno, I'm not sure if he's an interior lineman or a tackle, but nevertheless, it's an important addition to this TCU roster because you have 4 of your starting 5 offensive linemen leaving. You're losing Brandon Coleman. You're losing Andrew Coker. You're losing John Lands, who was your starting center, and then Willis Patrick, who came in as a plug-and-play transfer from Jackson State. He was your starting right guard and arguably your most consistent offensive lineman from start to finish this year. He's going to be heading to the NFL as well. So an offensive line that as a whole struggled with consistency this year is going to be losing 4 of its 5 starters. Colton Deary, the former Maryland transfer, is the only one coming back as of right now. So this is an important addition for the roster. And then with Osafo-Mensah coming in from Notre Dame, looking at who could be starting on this defensive line next year, I think it's really Dominic Williams and whoever else really can prove that they want and have earned those other 2 spots. You brought up Timon Mitchell and Caleb Fox Anthony as 2 guys that didn't really take a step forward this year. The young guys like Marcus Deal and Avion Carter and Zach Chapman and Kavion Huddleston, they hardly did anything this. I don't even know if any of them really played. I'm guessing they're all probably going to redshirt.
Those are all red shirts, all those guys. Yep.
If they are still on the roster when we get to 2024, that will remain to be seen. Hopefully they are, but this is a veteran guy who I kind of compared him to, last year TCU brought in Rick DeBreu from East Carolina. I think this is probably a better version of that. Played at a higher level of competition and was just as productive at ND as opposed to playing at East Carolina. So I kind of cracked up when I saw that TCU has the number 9 ranked transfer class right now. We're barely into it, and it's only 2 guys. So hopefully TCU can continue the trend that has really been set up since 2022 of bringing in talented players through the transfer portal. But two guys that are veteran guys have played a lot. Carson Bruno has been a 2-year starter at Louisiana Tech, so I think he's a guy who could be an early candidate for a starting role next year. And two good players that'll be coming into the program.
And good to see the focus, and we've talked about it a whole bunch, on the trenches on both sides of the ball. I mean, going into this 2023 season, offensive and defensive line were the biggest question marks, and those questions continued to not be answered throughout the entirety of the 2023 season. So, yes, there are big holes to fill, but I don't know necessarily that there are big shoes to fill. I think that these guys could definitely both come in and be starters right away. I think that's certainly on the table. And it's big additions. Yeah, Bruno was listed as the starting right tackle for Louisiana Tech. So, obviously has ability to play tackle. I think as a recruit, he might have been an interior lineman. So he might be a guy that has some flexibility to move around on the line. We'll see. Mensah, more of an edge, down lineman edge. So I think fits into what TCU had done the last 2 years on defense. We'll see where he fits going forward, but definitely getting 2 guys, one on each side of the line. Both were sought after, across college football and have a lot of experience. I mean, Osafo-Mensah has this will be his 6th season in college football, and he's played across all of those seasons. So at Notre Dame, where, obviously a big time program where you're competing for playing time with, some of the best recruits in the country. So I think that it's a good start to the offseason of bringing in these kinds of guys through the transfer portal, and see what else is to come down the line. I think obviously TCU is very, very active in the transfer portal, and we expect more names here coming up soon.
And two of those names that us TCU fans will be keeping an eye on, maybe some decisions will be made before we record our next episode next Sunday. The first is another Notre Dame guy, wide receiver Braylon James, who was a big-time four-star prospect in the 2023 class from Round Rock, Texas. He was actually high school teammates with Cameron Cook, the running back for TCU, who was a four-star recruit last year as well. There are multiple crystal balls from 247 Sports that have him going to TCU, which, if that were to happen, would be a big boost for a wide receiver room that has lost a couple of four-star guys recently. Jordan Hudson last year and Cordale Russell this year. Another guy that we'll get to in a little bit, DJ Allen as well. So that'll be a name to keep an eye on. Also, Boise State transfer Eric McAllister, who had a really big 2023 season for the Broncos with 47 catches, 873 yards, 5 touchdowns. One of the best, if not the best, offensive player on that team. Could be coming to TCU. There are crystal ball predictions in for him to come to Fort Worth as well, which if TCU is able to land those two receivers, that's going to be a huge, huge boost for a TCU offense that is also going to have Savion Williams coming back next year. That's something that he put out on his Instagram. He will be back for a 5th season with the Frogs next year. He's a senior, but he's got COVID eligibility, so he'll be taking a COVID year, I'm assuming, to come back and play a 5th season for the Frogs next year. So you've got Savion Williams. If you could add Braylon James and Eric McAllister to that mix, along with some of the guys who could be coming back, like J.P. Richardson and Dalen Wright and JoJo Earl, Major Everhart, we could be looking at another potent passing attack for TCU in 2024.
Yeah, Savion Williams declaring his intention to return to TCU is the biggest news for TCU. I think he had an opportunity to maybe go pro, had an opportunity. Certainly there were pretty loud smoke signals from Austin and from elsewhere that, there was a lot of interest in him to potentially hit the transfer portal. So for him to, hold himself in Fort Worth and for, whatever TCU is doing to keep him with the Horned Frogs, I think is terrific. And, he had that breakout game against the Longhorns. He's been, he's got all the physical tools. He's been a big time contributor in a lot of ways for TCU the last few seasons. And yeah, I think he will have a chance to be the guy next year. I mean, he had a chance to be the guy this year, and I think there were a few games where he was, but going into next year, he should be a focus of the offense. So really excited that he'll be back for TCU in 24.
Yeah, Savion Williams, we are happy that he is back. However, we are not happy about some of the newest transfer portal departures for TCU, one of which is, as we've highlighted already, linebacker Jonathan Bax, the freshman 3-star prospect who came in and really flashed as an edge player and really impressed during the fall camp process and was getting first team reps on the defense with some of the injuries and was talked about as a player that could really be the breakout candidate of the year for the TCU defense. And for whatever reason, just never really got extended run with this defense throughout the season and is now into the portal. And that's a real bummer considering that he was from the 2023 class, which TCU, I believe, has already had 4 players from the 2023 class, Cordale Russell, Safety Randon Fontenette, who we're about to get to, Mason White and Jonathan Bax. Those are all guys who are leaving the portal after 1 year in Fort Worth. So that's a big bummer there. Randon Fontenette, again, 4-star recruit, signed with TCU late in the recruiting process last year and got a fair amount of playing time this season toward the end of the year. I think this was a player, big safety, that Frog fans were really excited about, seemed to have a really bright future, and has not only left the team, but he's already committed to Vanderbilt for 2024. So that's also really disappointing. He was the number 3 recruit in TCU's 2023 class. Cordale Russell was the number 1 recruit. So your 2 of your top 3 recruits from the 2023 class are no longer on the roster. And another player who is no longer on the roster is wide receiver DJ Allen, who was a 4-star recruit from the 2022 class, which featured Jordan Hudson and Chase Biddle, who are also gone. Jordan Hudson, obviously, last year left the team and transferred to SMU. Chase Biddle entered the portal this offseason. So not just your 2023 class, but your top 3 recruits from the 2022 class are also no longer on the roster. So that's not great. You don't want to see. I mean, it's hard now for young players to sign with a team and wait their turn. I think it's almost easier now to go somewhere, and if you're not getting playing time after 1 or 2 seasons, you just transfer out and you can go to another program, whether it's a program of a similar caliber or a program of lesser caliber, and get more playing time. And I understand the players, at the end of the day, they want to play. They only have X number of years to go out there and play. And if they feel they can get more playing time, or if they can have a bigger role elsewhere, or maybe get a bigger bag to go elsewhere, then you got to do what you got to do. But Jonathan Bax and Randon Fontenette entering the portal was a big bummer. DJ Allen, he was hurt last year. He played in 3 games this year. He caught 2 balls for 10 yards. So was not really a factor for the offense, was I think a 3rd string receiver this year. And with some of the guys who could be coming in, Jakyle Baker, who is the number 1 ranked recruit in the 2024 class for TCU, is also a wide receiver. So a player who might benefit from transferring out and going to maybe a program of a lesser caliber and getting more playing time. But Jonathan Bax, Randon Fontenette, those 2, Anthony, I'm sure you would agree, that's a tough blow for this team, seeing those 2 guys leave.
Yeah, and it's just the untapped potential of these guys. I think you see the recruiting stars and you watch all the high school tape and you see them in spring and in fall, and you think, all right, these guys look like Big 12 football players. These guys can play. And especially in the case of Fontenette, he did play, and he was in there in big moments in big games. And yeah, to see that not kind of play out, to have to let them go and spread their wings elsewhere. It's unfortunate, but wishing them all the best. I think as growing up a Vanderbilt fan, I will continue to be rooting on Fontenette in the SEC and hope he can make some big plays over there. Maybe take down some of the SEC big dogs. That'd be fun, and it'll be fun to watch. And I think Bax and Allen, we've seen some of the offer lists come out, and I don't know that they're going to be getting SEC offers, but I think that they will have every opportunity to have very productive careers and more going forward. So all the best to them, and we'll see. I had a couple of transfer portal questions, but I think one thing, there's a lot of offers out there. There's a lot going around on social media. Looks like TCU is in the mix or really trying to get involved on a lot of offensive linemen, a lot of defensive backs, clearly identifying these problem areas on the roster. One thing, though, Russ, I guess that's been a little bit curious, and I'm interested in your thoughts on this. The quarterback position, both TCU's rostered quarterbacks and the transfer portal quarterbacks, it's been pretty quiet for the Horned Frogs. I mean, thus far, I guess we would expect a Josh Hoover, Chandler Morris quarterback room to continue into 2024. I think if one of them was going to jump in, maybe they would have already. Obviously, it's still early yet. But on the same token, we haven't really seen like all these lots of big name quarterbacks from all over in the portal. We haven't seen a bunch of offered by TCU today posts on social media. So I don't know how active TCU is in the space. Maybe those two guys are holding strong with the Frogs, and the TCU coaching staff is happy to stick with the two of them.
Yeah, that's a really great question. And KJ Jefferson, Arkansas quarterback, is in the portal. We haven't really heard any rumblings about him coming to Fort Worth. He played for Kendall Briles for a couple of years when Kendall was the offensive coordinator at Arkansas. So, maybe he'll stay in the SEC, look to continue to compete there. But yeah, I agree with you. It's been very quiet for TCU as far as the quarterback position goes. And I think the coaching staff is really high on Josh Hoover, given how much they let him throw the ball during the second half of the year. And the fact that they flipped him from Indiana, and I think Sonny Dykes was a big part of that. So Hoover, I think, is well within the good graces of the coaching staff. And Chandler Morris, he's been in the program for 3 years now. I am a little surprised he hasn't entered the portal. Maybe he still believes he can be the starter in 2024, or maybe the coaching staff has told him that when he is healthy, he is the starter. But look, I'm going to be 100% honest. I'm always 100% honest on this podcast. I don't think Chandler Morris is that dude for TCU. I really don't. And it's not because I think he's a bad person or anything like that, but he just hasn't been able to stay healthy. He was injured at the end of the 2021 season. He was injured for most of 2022, and he was injured again in 2023. He hasn't been able to stay on the field. And when he has been on the field, let's be honest, again, he's had moments, but I think he's left a lot to be desired for a fourth-year quarterback in comparison to a second-year quarterback in Josh Hoover, who, to me, just seems to have more potential. I think he has a bigger arm. I think he has shown more in terms of his leadership on the field. And he put up good numbers at the end of the season. You look at his total yards, his touchdown interception ratio, and I think some of the mistakes that he made this year are a good problem for a coaching staff to have. Very coachable, very correctable kind of mistakes. And I'm not saying Chandler Morris isn't in that same category, but one guy's going to be going into his fifth year of college ball next year, and the other guy is going to be going into his third. And so that for those reasons, I'm a little surprised that Morris hasn't maybe looked to go somewhere else. But maybe the coaching staff likes both of these guys a lot, and not to mention Hoss Haney, who is the number 2 ranked recruit for 2024. He's a quarterback. He's had a tremendous season for Aledo High School, who is in the state championship in the state of Texas this year. With Hoss Haney coming in next year, Josh Hoover, Chandler Morris, maybe TCU feels that with those 3 guys, they don't need to go out and bring in a quarterback. And maybe they're also having some cold feet because, how many times did we talk about TCU coming into this season? They missed on Sawyer Robertson. They missed on Walker Howard. They missed on Jaden Rashada. They ultimately brought in Chance Nolan, who literally just chucked the deuces and walked out a week into fall camp. Maybe they don't want to have that problem again. They don't want to, bring in a veteran quarterback who may be told he's going to have a chance to compete for a starting job, and then he finds out he's, I don't know, third or fourth on the depth chart, and is just like, all right, I'm done. I'm out of here. It's such an interesting discussion because the quarterback position, I mean, some of these other positions, I mean, you could have multiple wide receivers, multiple offensive linemen, multiple linebackers, whatever out on the field. The quarterback, you have one guy. And there's so much risk that goes into, if we bring in a veteran quarterback who was a starter somewhere else, what happens to our current guy? Does he become alienated, and does he want to leave? But we don't want him to leave. We want to keep him. We want to create competition. It's a really fascinating discussion, and for TCU, we'll see how this offseason unfolds and whether or not they want to ultimately add someone or if someone decides to leave. But I guess for me, I would like to see TCU add a quarterback personally. But if it winds up just being Josh Hoover, Chandler Morris, and Hoss Haney, I don't think that would be the worst possible scenario.
Yeah, I think TCU's in pretty good hands with those three. If it remains those three, it's a very difficult destination for a transfer quarterback. Like poor Chance Nolan came in here maybe thinking he was going to compete for a job and was immediately third on the depth chart and is like, "What? I was just starting games in the Pac-12 last year. What's going on? And now I'm third on the depth chart." And I guess I don't know what he thought he was stepping into, but it's the same kind of thing this year. If both Morris and Hoover are on the roster and you're bringing somebody in, it's not like Kyle McCord is not leaving Ohio State to be, the third string at TCU. Not that he would be if he came here. I don't know. I don't know. I also don't know where the line is of what of those guys would be an upgrade over what TCU already has.
Yeah.
Is Tyler Van Dyke making you better? Is KJ Jefferson making you better? Are you going to win more football games? I think maybe, there's something to be said about his rapport with Kendall Briles and, what that may mean. But I think there's very, very few, even though these are all pretty famous quarterbacks and have been playing at big time programs and are top level guys. But how many of them do you feel is like, oh yeah, that is 100% definitely an upgrade over Josh Hoover and Chandler Morris? I don't know. I think that number is pretty small. So I think it will probably remain pretty quiet for TCU, and maybe they pick up somebody who's, looking to get themselves up to, to the Power 5 level, who's been toiling away at the G5 level and just really wants to get that Power 5 experience, or maybe get a coaching experience. But I don't think any of these top level guys, that the names that are all out there, are really giving TCU a look. I don't think TCU is, and I don't think TCU is giving them a look either. I think TCU, like you said, I think TCU is pretty solid with what we have. And yeah, sorry for this tangent. We've gone really long on football here. It's postseason. We're not even in football season, and we've gone nearly an hour on football. So sorry about that. But I thought that was a very, the transfer portal it's an interesting topic, and I think there's just a whole lot of fun what ifs, and obviously the big news this week with the Joe Gillespie thing. So I guess we can move on.
The transfer portal really is a season of its own, considering that all of this will be going into January and February with the actual signing day. One final note that I will make about the portal and with quarterbacks: if TCU theoretically were to add a quarterback, two names that stick out to me from what I've seen. The first is Chandler Rogers from North Texas, who put up huge numbers for the Mean Green this year, is deserving of an opportunity to compete at a higher level. Maybe you bring in someone like that and you create some competition. for the starting quarterback job in 2024. And then KJ Jefferson, I don't think he would come to TCU. I think he would probably stay in the SEC. But what I found interesting was he kind of regressed this year. His numbers were not where they were in 2022 or 2021, but he put up very good stats under Kendall Briles. He was completing 67 to 68% of his passes, I believe, and had a very good touchdown to interception ratio. And one thing Sonny Dykes has talked about, and something that he's mentioned as a coaching point for Josh Hoover, is got to take care of the football. And KJ Jefferson took pretty good care of the football those 2 seasons he was with Kendall Briles. So that's what I'll wrap up here with as we get ready to transition here from football to basketball. We have a couple basketball items to hit on. Of course, the TCU men's team traveled to Toronto, Ontario, Canada, for a showdown against Clemson, a homecoming of sorts for Emmanuel Miller as the Horned Frogs took on the 24th ranked Clemson Tigers. This was a game that was very close throughout the first half. Unfortunately, in the second half, TCU began to fall behind and just straight up shot the ball like crap. TCU shot 32% from the field in this game, 18% from 3-point range, and TCU ultimately loses this game 74 to 66, the final score. First loss of the season for TCU. Was a battle of unbeaten teams. Clemson coming in at 8-0, top 25 ranking. TCU coming in at 7-0 after a buzzer beater win over Georgetown last weekend. But in this game, I thought TCU did do some good things in this game. I watched most of this game again at our White Elephant Christmas party. We had it on the TV, and TCU defensively, I thought did a really nice job in the first half. TCU forced 13 turnovers in this game. Jameer Nelson and Micah Peavy each had 3 steals in this game. I thought Ernest Uday had a nice game rebounding the ball. He had 10 rebounds to lead TCU. Emmanuel Miller finished with 16 points and 6 rebounds. But it was Joe Girard and PJ Hall, the 2 best players for Clemson, who really carried the load in this one. I thought TCU did a fairly decent job of guarding Girard, who shoots 44% from 3. He was 5 of 13 from the field. He was 3 of 8 from 3-point range, but he was getting to the free throw line quite a bit. I think he was 8 of 9 from the free throw line. So that's really where he was able to do damage, especially in the second half. And PJ Hall was just, at times, he was almost unguardable in this game. And at 6'10", 230 or 240, whatever he is, he was playing like the biggest guy on the court and kind of exposing what we talked about in the Georgetown game, which is one of these big guys is going to have to step up for TCU. I thought Ernest Uday rebounded the ball well. He's done a pretty good job of protecting the rim, but offensively, he is still really raw. And then Mustafa and Cork coming off the bench. Xavier Cork, God bless him, he was dreadful in this game. I mean, he might be out of the rotation here pretty soon unless Jamie Dixon wants to keep rotating 3 big guys, because he only played, I think, 5 minutes against Georgetown and did literally nothing in that game.
Got ejected.
He was struggling big time in this game, and I saw a sequence where he turned. I think he missed a bunny from like 4 feet, and then got called for a moving screen, and just did not look the part out there in this game. I don't want to sound like I'm ragging on the guy too much, but the big guys, PJ Hall was the best big guy on the floor in this game, and it really wasn't all that close. He was really good for Clemson. TCU just didn't make shots in this game. I thought TCU had good looks. The player who stood out to me as far as just struggling on the offensive end was Jameer Nelson. He was 2 of 12 from the field. At one point, he was 1 for 10. He finished 0 for 5 from 3-point range. And going back to his time at Delaware, he was a 20-point per game scorer at Delaware. He didn't shoot the ball particularly well from three. I think he shot 30% from three. But right now for TCU, he's at about 11 points per game, shooting 19% from 3-point range. That's not good enough whatsoever. He's got to be, I'm not saying he's going to be Mike Miles Jr., but he was brought in, I think, to fill that sort of role for this team. And he's got to be putting up 15 to 20 points a game for TCU to get to where it wants to be. I'll give him credit because he fought defensively. Again, he had 3 steals. He's averaging over 3 steals a game, which is fantastic. But they have to get more out of him offensively. And I thought this game just showed that right now he's in a shooting slump, and hopefully he can break out of it and TCU can get him going here soon. But overall, a tough loss to a good team, and we'll see if TCU can bounce back with a win next weekend against Arizona State.
Yeah, my positive I'll give on this one is Micah Peavy was awesome. Like, there were moments in this game where Micah Peavy was so disruptive defensively, and he was attacking offensively. He was getting himself to the free throw line, and one of the few Horned Frogs making free throws at a consistent rate. I think he had, I don't know that it's his best game because he's had a lot of really good games this season, but it was one of those games where it's like, oh yeah, he's the dude. He's still all that defensive tenacity that he has was taking over at points in this game. So shout out to him. Other than that, very few positives here. I mean, I think that and part of it is you're playing in like a weird campus stadium. So there's shooting lines are weird, and shooting is always going to be bad at those kind of stadiums. But 3 of 16 on 3-pointers is you're gonna lose when you're playing good teams. If you shoot under 20% from 3-point in any Big 12 game this season, that's a loss. Mm-hmm. So TCU has to be better there. And yeah, Jameer Nelson had a terrible day. And really, Jacoby Coles had a terrible day. Let's see. He ended up with 6 total points, 3 of 10 shooting overall. I think that was one of his worst games this season. Mm-hmm. Overall, TCU's obviously counting on him to be a big-time contributor, and he was a little bit taken out of this one. This Clemson team is really good. They're one of the best rebounding teams in the country, and they showed that they out-rebounded TCU pretty handily here. PJ Hall, Joe Girard are probably all ACC first team, definitely all ACC first, second, third team level guys. We talked all last season about TCU's problem guarding big men, and when they're faced with a talented scoring big, that it causes big problems. And obviously Drew Timme in the NCAA tournament, the most obvious example of that, one of the best players in all of college basketball, fully takes advantage of TCU. And TCU comes into this season, you add Ernest Udeh Jr., and you think, okay, maybe there's some better there. You add Issam Mustafa, but man, Mustafa and Cork played a combined 20 minutes and contributed 3 fouls, 3 turnovers, and 3 points combined. I mean, and combined for a minus 19 while on the court. That's rough. I mean, Udeh probably needs to be able to keep himself on the court more, with foul trouble or with conditioning or whatever it is, that he's not getting like 25 minutes a game. I mean, he's at like hovering around under 20 minutes a game. And, if you're going to be the guy, the big man that TCU has to rely on, especially if those minutes, I thought Mustafa was especially bad in this game as well. He's had really good games this season where he's been a great stopgap and performed at a high level in that role off the bench. This was a bad performance from him and from Cork. I mean, and part of that is they're going against really talented guys. Clemson's other forward, Ian something, Schiffler, whatever, that other guy, he's an amazing rebounder and a terrific playmaker as well. So, they've got really good, talented guys. But this was the first test for TCU, the first really real test, and to only fall by 8 points at a neutral site against a top 25 team, a team that in all the metrics is top 20 everywhere. I think it's still pretty encouraging that TCU plays this poorly, shoots that bad. I mean, overall for the game, 32%.
Yeah.
That's terrible. And if you can shoot that bad and still mostly be in this game against a really good team, I think TCU is going to be okay. I don't think the sky's falling just yet.
No.
You got to come out and win against Arizona State in Dickies Arena in Fort Worth. It gets to count as a neutral site game. You got to go take that one, because that's a team that is not as good as Clemson, probably not as good as TCU, and you can't let that one slip through the cracks.
And the one stat line that stuck out to me also in this game, the four starters, Emmanuel Miller, Micah Peavy, Jameer Nelson, and Jacoby Coles, were a combined 0 for 11 from three-point range in this game. You're not going to win games when those guys are shooting the ball that poorly from the perimeter. I don't think that's going to be the norm, though. I think it was just one of those nights where, the tough shots weren't going in, and even some of those open looks. I thought Emmanuel Miller and Jameer Nelson had some opportunities to knock down some open spot up threes, and they just, were not going in. And,
oh man, there were some kicks out to Jameer Nelson where he's standing wide open in the corner that you just have to hit those shots.
Yeah, and I don't remember who put the shot up, but somebody shot a three from the elbow there where the ball hit the backboard over the top of the rim and didn't even touch rim. That's how poorly TCU was shooting the ball in this game. But like you said, to go out of the country and play a top 25 team and shoot 18% from three and 32% from the field, and only lose by 8. A big part of that was your defense. You forced 13 turnovers, and actually TCU, I think, only finished with 8 or 9
or 10. Yeah.
So they were taking care of the ball offensively, and the rebounding battle was, I think Clemson had a slight edge. You just weren't making shots in this game. So I think going into the Arizona State game, as you said, at Dickies Arena, that's one that you have to win, and I think you have to close out this non-conference schedule on a high note. So we will see if the men's team can bounce back next weekend. The women's team, though, still undefeated after a big win today over Prairie View. Final score 85-41. I believe in our last episode, we talked about the wins over Tulsa and Abilene Christian, where TCU got to 9-0. The second longest win streak in program history at 9 wins after the victory against Abilene Christian, and then starting off 8-0, clinching the best start to a season in program history. So TCU's women's team is continuing to push further into uncharted waters as they take down Prairie View 85-41 to get to 10-0 on the season. Sedona Prince did not play, maybe just getting a day off for this game. It's Prairie View. It's a low-level non-conference opponent. And what was encouraging about this one, though, was some of the role players coming off the bench had an opportunity to get extended minutes and really shined with that opportunity. Victoria Flores off the bench scored 19 points, which is a season high for her by a wide margin. Aaliyah Robertson, who has been very consistent as the 6th woman off the bench for TCU, she had 14 in this one. Jade Owens continues to facilitate at a very high level, 8 assists to go along with 9 points. She's, by the numbers, one of the top point guards in all of women's hoops as far as assists are concerned and assist to turnover ratio. And then Agnesema Anopu, the forward from Stanford, with 16 points and I believe 6 rebounds in this game as well. So even in a game with no Sedona Prince, an off shooting night for Madison Connor, TCU wins a game by almost 40 points. And again, it's Prairie View, but this is uncharted territory for the women's team as the Frogs are now 10-0. I believe Lamar is the next non-conference game coming up, and I've said it before and I'll say it again. I think this team is going to finish the non-conference schedule undefeated. And once we get into Big 12 play, we'll get an opportunity to see what this team is really about.
Yeah, Jaden Owens currently ranks 12th overall in all of women's college basketball in assists, and that's every other player, except for maybe one or two, has played at least two more games. So yeah, her probably assists per game, she's probably top 5 or so. So yeah, absolutely performing at a high level. And yeah, great to see particularly true freshman Victoria Flores come in and perform like that. That's a building block of this team going forward. And future continues to be really bright. And even in a day where, Sedona Prince can get a breather and take the night off, TCU easily handles business there.
Mm-hmm. And I think with that, we will go ahead and transition out for the evening. Anthony, I'm not sure if you had any final thoughts before we wrapped up here tonight.
Yeah, just thoughts with everyone back in Nashville. There's a bad tornado went through Nashville, and so hope everyone is okay and safe, and that the cleanup effort that's underway goes successfully, and just anybody who finds ways to donate to whatever Red Cross or church groups or whatever is supporting that effort. All of our thoughts with Nashville taking care of that. That's my hometown, so all of my family and folks are safe. But still think it's a scary night to see the videos of there's a tornado going through and then there's like an explosion inside of a tornado. Is some wild videos coming out of that. So all the thoughts there. Also thoughts with the Wycheck family. I don't know if anybody here remembers the Tennessee Titans tight end, Frank Wycheck. He was one of the key cogs in the Music City Miracle back in the 1999-2000 Super Bowl run for the Titans, but he passed away. Tragic, fell at his home in Tennessee. So sorry to end on a downer note with those couple of things, but just my heart is back in Tennessee right now. Those two things. Frank Wycheck was one of my first ever favorite football players for that team. That was, I was probably in 6th or 7th grade when that run was happening, and that was some of my earliest memories of going to football games was that Titans season. So for all the Titans fans are probably mourning that, and certainly the Wycheck family, our thoughts were with them as well. So much love to Nashville.
Yeah, absolutely tough news there, and you hate to hear what's going on there with the severe weather in Nashville and that loss for the Titans. So thoughts and prayers out there for sure. And with that, we will go ahead and wrap up our episode for this evening. We appreciate all of you continuing to follow us and listen to us here on the Frogs Up TCU Sports Podcast. Again, charliehustle.com. Get your TCU Horned Frog apparel. Use that promo code Frogs O War. Get 15% off all of your TCU items, or use the promo code 101215 TEN1215 for 15% off any item at charliehustle.com. Get your TCU Horned Frog football trading cards through On It Athlete. We have affiliate links, again, posted to our Facebook and our Twitter at Frogs of War and our website, frogsofwar.com. Prize Picks, daily fantasy sports, promo code FROGS12 for a deposit match up to $100. That'll do it for this evening. I am Russ Hodges. That is Anthony North. We will be back next Sunday to record, where I am sure we will have much more TCU football offseason news to discuss, as well as the latest with TCU men's and women's basketball. So with that, we will go ahead and sign off for the evening with a Frogs Up.
Get your frogs up.